Right, thank you. Any questions from the floor? In which case we will move on. And it gives me great pleasure to ask Mahesh Vaswani to ask his question. Where are you, Mahesh? Oh, he's here. Wait for it. Microphone coming.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Which one single measure would the panel most like the government to introduce to stimulate the economy?
Ooh, right, okay. Who wants to start with that one? Andrew.
Why do I always go first? So this one, I actually went to our chief economist I thought I knew the answer, but actually, so he came back and gave me a few answers actually. So I'm going to read this out because you might disagree with this. He thinks it overestimates the influence of government to even suggest that one single measure can have a magic bullet effect. Much of our recent malaise has simply been down to a lack of animal spirits on the part of both businesses and households, and an overwhelming desire to pay down debt, which we're seeing phenomenally. Base rate 0.5%. So what else are you going to do? The government's biggest influence is on the pace of austerity. As for individual measures, they tend to make a difference only at the margin. But that being said, the Help to Buy scheme for purchasers of new houses will probably go down as the most fruitful intervention, albeit that its direct impact on economic growth is minimal. And then he said infrastructure spending should be the next one. But other things there are government initiatives I mentioned earlier that are actually out there that I don't think there's more cash availability now through government initiatives than there have been any time in my career. Business Growth Fund, regional, there's so many funds. I think half the problem is trying to find where it is and looking for it. You Google it and then you'll have like 10,000 places to look for it. So I think there are lots of good initiatives out there. Regional Growth Fund is a great one where literally the government pays you a deposit on a machine and you don't have to pay it back. I think that's a pretty good deal. So I think there's a lot out there. But go to our economist, Help to Buy scheme, he rings.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's go to the other end of the table. Mike, what's the thing that bugs you most of all?
It's funny because I went and looked at an economist website as well. And their suggestion was to do absolutely nothing at all and let the market sort it out, because the government half the time gets it wrong,
Yep.
and the other time doesn't get it very right either. And so I'm going to stick with that, do absolutely nothing at all.
Okay. Simon?
I like that idea, because one of the things that occurred to me when I heard the question was really I'd like the government to stop interfering and let the market sort itself out, which is the same answer. And the sorts of interference that I've seen recently is the government interfering with pensions and the caps on pensions and getting employers to pay pensions for their employees, the increasing interference in employment rights. And I'd say this not because employees don't need protection and all of these things need doing, so pensions are wonderful things, but really it's loading private sector and businesses with cost and burden. And I think they should stop interfering in that respect. If they are going to interfere, which they will, I think they should do things like have a sensible apprenticeship scheme that's workable. That means that firms can actually take someone on and pay them and teach them the ropes. I think that they should, what did I put down here? We should try and ban out-of-town retailing to try and get more investment back into our towns, because they're becoming ghost towns, trying to get people living in our towns.
Don't the punters like out-of-town retailing, though?
Well, they might do, but it's at a cost of our town centres, and you only need to go to some town centres and see really there's nothing going on. I think that they ought to let us invest in residential in pensions in some shape or form. So that's ground rents or flats above shops. I think that would help stimulate a lot of investment in certain areas, not in London. And I think things like stamp duty over £2 million is not helpful and doesn't raise much revenue. So those are the sorts of things that occurred to me.
Okay. Right, let's go to the other end. Steve, what's your...
Well, a couple of thoughts. I mean, even though I was told in school that markets are perfect, I don't really believe they work that way. So we have to be careful. I think there is a role that government has to play, but there isn't one silver bullet. And there's only so much that government can do, and we have to be careful about that. I guess there would be 2 points that I would make on this thing. I think at one level, from a regulatory point of view, government needs to make sure it is creating an environment that encourages enterprise and encourages people to hire, job creation. And in fact, we have a number of things in place, red tape, some of it real, some of it maybe in the category of urban myth, that stifles that a little bit. So what are the things that we can do to begin to change sentiment? We were chatting before we gathered here. One of the great partners in the Berkshire Hathaway engine in the United States, Charlie Munger, one of the all-time great investors, talks about economics as a behavioral science. It is a little bit about what we believe and what we think, and the mood swings and the momentum that comes from that. But the other point that I would make, and this is something that London LEP is trying to look at, is are there things that there's practical steps that we can do to think about how we make it easier for smaller businesses and growing businesses to access financing, whether that's debt, whether that's equity, whether that's the sort of venture capital markets, whether it's the signposting and the environments that kind of create that. Are there some things that we can do that are innovative, that are additive, that we can use to kind of create leverage and match funding from Europe, from other places, to get that energy going out there? And we think there is. So if I had to pick one thing, it would be around that access to finance space. We know the big banks, including Andrew and HSBC, Santander, others are anxious to lend to this group, but we also know that there's an awful lot that needs to happen to get them ready to be able to go to a high street bank to take down that kind of loan. So I think there is a role for government to help
And on
encourage.
on that, I mean, interesting this morning, I went to see the Startup Loan Company. Has anyone heard of them? So it's a government initiative. They lend up to, James Kahn is chairman. I think, so he's a friend of ours. And, because you wouldn't want to be an enemy of his.
Don't employ his daughter, do you?
No.
He does.
Actually, she was there. But they've done 6,000 startup loans in the last year to young entrepreneurs who have an idea, and they lend them up to about £10,000 at actually commercial rates. So I think that's a fantastic 6,000 loans, and they're actually the take up as they're getting more publicity is getting higher and higher. So the interesting conversations we're having is the ones they lent a year ago, which is exactly what you're saying. Are they at the stage where they become into the bank side of things now? So we're talking to them along the lines of what can we do to try and mentor these young entrepreneurs. So forget the lending bit, try and sort of educate them more on what the real world's like. So what can we do to mentor them? What can we do to teach them on how the banking system works? There's a initiative called, one running with, I'm trying to think what it's called. Who did we see yesterday, Heather? Growth Accelerator, which again is a fantastic initiative, which sort of moves on to taking these people through the journey. But it needs everyone to work together to make it happen. That's what I was saying earlier. It's the whole signposting bit, because everyone just goes on the internet and you can't. I know my daughter doing her homework just trying to find stuff on the internet. It's a nightmare. So how you signpost that and get everyone together.
Plagiarism's very tricky nowadays, isn't it? Nick, what's your tip for the day?
I think one of the major ones is one that has been highlighted by, which is there are almost too many potential sources of finance, and I think the one I would really like to see get moving is the Business Growth Fund, which was launched with a great song and dance, and every time it makes a loan, there's quite a bit of publicity. It was supposed to be, when it was established, the fund that went where the banks would fare to tread, and it was supposed to be innovative. It was explained to me once that it was, for those with long memories, a new investors in industry that later became 3i. I'm still not sure that it actually has put investments in places where the banks wouldn't, in other circumstances, lend. I.e., is it really going where others fear to tread?
But do you know who the shareholders are?
The banks.
Yeah, the banks,
Yeah, which is how 3i started, and so with the same incentive, but with a strong push from government. So I think it's a very exciting initiative. I wish it could be seen to be doing more and perhaps promoting its objectives rather than individual lending packages. A quite separate suggestion, and it's one for you to think about, Steve, and it was in the States, a major impetus from government was the payroll tax cut,
Yep.
which had a short-term shot in the economic arm, and people have said to me, this was the right thing at the right time. I wonder why we haven't done it here.
No, well, quite. I've written down on my bit of paper, jobs tax. What was the jobs tax? The jobs tax was what the Tories called national insurance contributions when Labour were proposing to increase it from 12.8% to 13.8%. It still went to 13.8%, although they meddled with the margins or the cut-off points. My view would be that employers' national insurance contributions should be significantly reduced. When I say significantly, I'd say halved. Seems to me to be an aberration that you impose a tax on employers for employing people when you want to encourage employers to employ people. So that's my view. My other view would be I'd radically simplify the tax system, although I suppose that would be doing myself out of a job. I feel like a turkey voting for Christmas. Anyway, Mahesh, how was that? That was okay? Good. Right, thank you.